Hello Internet, welcome to the channel. My name's Frankie, and in today's video we're going to be building a lovely night themed house for the Egyptian fruit bat. So for those of you who've been playing Planet Zoo on console edition, you will know that the walkthrough exhibit has been an option since day one. Since release date we've been able to add walkthrough exhibits to our parks. However, we haven't actually had anything to go in it. But with the arrival of the Twilight Pack on consoles very recently, the Egyptian fruit bat was added, and I've been very excited to build a little walkthrough area for these bats because I just love bats personally. I like to go to my local park and watch them pretty late at night. It's just a good fun time. The placement of these things are quite awkward, annoyingly. I had the idea of having one entire walkthrough exhibit. There would be an indoor area that you could then come out the other side and enter like a mesh dome kind of area, because one of my more local zoos has something very similar to this. So that's what I'm trying to do here, get a layout that would match that. Once you've placed these walkthrough exhibits, you can change their appearance in terms of if it's going to have this hard shell like you see here, or if it's going to be made of glass or mesh, or a custom barrier that you can make yourself. And that is what I opt to do. I do have a little look at what the other options are. For instance here, the wire mesh, I do think it looks quite nice and would work for a more open area kind of design. But I end up going for the invisible barrier. I can't remember what it's called. Oh yeah, that's right, it's just called none, isn't it? Pretty easy. Yeah, I opt to use that so that I can come up with my own custom barrier. Also, whilst I have your attention, I would just like to ask that if you're not already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's free for you, you can leave whenever you like, and I'll feel slightly less lonely. So to begin with, I'm going to be building around the solid version of this walkthrough exhibit, and that's just so that I know exactly where these building pieces are. Now, I'm using some plaster wall, 4-meter plaster wall pieces, and I've coloured them completely black, and I am applying those to the inside wall of this walkthrough exhibit. I'm going to be going for a nighttime theme, as in like pitch black skies, you know, starry night kind of thing. So I decided to use these black plaster pieces. I'm also going to extend it on one side. It's not going to be the exact size of the walkthrough exhibit. And don't worry, if you do this, the animals don't then escape. They're fully contained, just like the barriers are invisible, it's completely fine. So yeah, the reason for doing this is I wanted to create a little bit of depth for this bat exhibit to imply that they could be going further back in this room to roost and like kind of just sleep on the plant life and stuff that we're going to add later. Just make it a bit more immersive, because otherwise they're just going to be stuck directly above the path, which they will do anyway, but by adding this extra space it suggests that they are going to be moving about the exhibit house a lot more. For the roof, I keep it nice and simple and just use some concrete wall floor pieces, just the 4-meter squares, and I just cover the entire roof with that, and then I top that off with some lovely slate tiles. Now with that basic roof on, I decided to start decorating the outside. I don't really want the black plaster to be what's shown on the exterior of this building. I want it to look a little bit more realistic, like it's actually been built by somebody. So I'm going to be using the dry stone wall pieces, the 1-meter pieces, to create a trim around the bottom of the house. After that, I then use the stained wood wall pieces, 1 meter again, just above that trim. I did consider changing the colour, but I actually quite like this colour, so I'm not going to bother. And then once I've got this 1 meter piece in place, I can place another 2-meter piece on top to create that 4-meter square that we like to build in. It'll be the same height as the door then, which is appropriate, meaning that we can start to build a bit more easily. And the rest of the wall is really quite simply covered up just by using some 4-meter stained wood wall pieces, and that bridges the gap perfectly. I do then need to add a 1-meter piece right at the top underneath the roof slate tiles, just because you see a little bit of concrete up there. We just want to mask that. With that done, I did feel that the separation between the dry stone wall piece and then the painted wood was a bit too sudden. There needs to be something breaking that up, and normally that would be like a plank or something. So what I'm going to do is use the East Asia stone support beam, and I'm just going to sink it in a little bit and have it act as kind of a what should we call it? A lip. Yeah, acts as kind of a lip that runs around the building, separating the two different sections, the two different materials. This will really help to break up what at the moment looks like quite a flat building. And with the main building kind of done, I'm just going to create two little porch areas that I can then pop over the top of these, what do you call them? The flappy doors. That's definitely not what they're called, but that's what I'm going to call them. To create kind of an airlock, you're going to need a solid door for the people to go in, and then you go through the flappy doors afterwards, just to make sure there's a bit of a buffer zone so that bats can't get out. I'm using the exact same building materials that I've been using so far on the main house, and just creating a small little porch area that I can then join to the front of the building. And with that airlock or porch area in place, I can then start to connect the paths from the exhibit to the main path outside. And I'm continuing that log path outside and inside the airlock, but as soon as we get indoors, inside the actual exhibit, I'm going to turn it to sand, or just, well, I think it's called natural path, so that I can edit it with whatever textures I want, just depending on what brushes I'm using inside. I then found this adorable little paper mache bat, so I decided I was going to pop him above the entrance, because look how cute he is. Now, inside, I started to make the edits that I already knew that I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to do this from the get-go, and that is to have a raised area at the back where all the planting's been done, kind of like a raised planter, I guess. It's just a bit of a step up, so that if the bats decide they're going to land on the floor, the guests are less likely to tread on them because they're actually going to be slightly risen or whatever. It's kind of a thing that my local zoo does. They have a raised area for that exact reason. If the bats are going to land, they're more likely to land up there, not only because it takes up most of the floor space in the exhibit, but also because it's risen. They like being up high, I guess. Yeah, that just stops the guests being very likely to tread on the bats. I'm then going to fill this area in with mulch so that the ground level looks like it is higher than it actually is, and then I can start to apply the plants and stuff over the top of that. Despite the fact that these guys can live in forests and jungles and stuff, of course they can, I am actually going to just stick to the grassland and desert, yes, those two biomes, because so far the exhibits on the outside, the habitats on the outside even, is the Nile monitor, and there's going to be a warthog and an aardvark. All these quite close together, they're living in grasslands and deserts, so I want to kind of stick to that theme. Plus, the plant life that you put in here does not affect the bats, so it is really up to you what you're going to be doing. So I use a multitude of plants from those two biomes in the Africa continent, and then I litter the place with stalactites and whatnot to try and make it look kind of like a cave. And as a kind of finishing touch, I decide to take some art pieces that are, how would I describe them? Kind of half of a sphere, so they kind of look like buttons almost. I turn them completely white, turn them upside down, and then sink them into the roof. With the roof being black, which I changed the colour of the concrete that's up there to be black. With it being black, the white spheres sunk into them look like stars. So I sink them in at different depths and stuff to make them a little bit smaller, and just litter the ceiling with these shapes to make it look like a starry night. Now, I've done all the talking about what I'm about to do, just so that I can stop talking for a second and you guys can enjoy a lovely speed build. So I'll be back in a minute. With all the plant life and massive mushrooms in place, I can start to add things that are essential but kind of boring. And those include the exhibit education board so that we know what is in here. We want our guests to be educated, don't we? We need them to know what animals they're looking at because it's very, very important. We're also going to add the donation bins that we're nicking from the front of the Nile monitor habitat because we want to stick to the Africa colour scheme. As you may remember, for each of my different areas in my zoo, I've been colouring the donation bins a slightly different colour just to kind of represent that area. And it was at this point that I decided I'm not going to bother with the outside area that's going to be like a meshy dome kind of thing. I actually really like what I built, so I'm going to get rid of this other walkthrough exhibit, put the ground texture back to kind of matching the rest of it, and then continue my build. I'm not going to worry about it not being how I initially planned. Plans change, and that's a good thing. It meant that what I was doing, well, it just felt right, didn't it? So I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing. I then also decided to add a bat sign, and it's actually the Twilight Animal signpost. It's covered in the paper mache animals because it's just super duper cute, and I think it's going to work really well. All I have to do is remove the wombat, fox, raccoon and skunk. I'm going to add another one of the bats and turn the arrow round, but this sign is going to work really well just for letting guests know that this building is actually a building to go inside of. All the other animals so far, it's been pretty damn clear that they are there to be seen because they're in outside habitats. This one you actually have to enter a building, so I want to make it crystal clear what is going on. As for decoration outside of the habitat house, I decided to actually keep the building really quite simple and instead just surround it in wildlife. I'm going to apply some ground textures that kind of match this grassland and desert-y vibe that I'm going for. I lean more towards a desert, so it's primarily soil and sand. Then I'm going to use a bunch of plants, and I use 2 different species of tree and then only 2 species of bush as well. And I just make sure there's lots of variation in size and stuff, make it look really busy. I'm also going to use some deserty rocks as well and sink them into the ground just to add a bit more interest in this area, make it look a little bit less flat. And it helps to really hide the building by adding all these things. It makes it look a lot less lost because at the moment it just looks like it's been plonked there. But surrounding it by trees and stuff just makes it look more natural. It makes this area just seem a lot more appealing and a bit more convincing. So yeah, I'm really happy with how this turned out. Thank you so much for having watched this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel to see more videos like this appearing in your subscription feed. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.